The men who once ignored her now whispered her name in fear. 6 months ago, she served coffee. Tonight, she owned the city, and every man who thought she was just a waitress was already too late. Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you're ready to dive into this unforgettable story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll bring you another incredible tale you absolutely can't miss. Let's get started, and don't forget to like and share to help our community grow. The grease from the kitchen clung to Sienna Washington's skin like a second layer she could never scrub away. 11:30 p.m., and her feet screamed inside the discount sneakers she'd bought 3 months ago, the ones already splitting at the seams. She balanced 4 plates along her left arm, the scalding ceramic kissing the inside of her wrist as she wove through the maze of tables at Castellano's, the kind of upscale Italian restaurant where the appetizers cost more than her weekly grocery budget. "Excuse me," she murmured, her voice practiced in its invisibility. The businessman in the tailored suit didn't even glance up from his phone. To him, she was furniture. Animate, occasionally useful furniture that brought him overpriced pasta and disappeared when summoned with a snap of his manicured fingers. Sienna set down the plates with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that broken dishes came out of her paycheck. Osso buco for table 7. Branzino for the couple who'd complained 3 times about the temperature of their wine. Truffle risotto for the woman dripping in diamonds that could have paid Sienna's rent for a year. Finally, the diamond woman sighed, not quite looking at Sienna's face. "Is it too much to ask for prompt service?" "My apologies." The words tasted like ash, but Sienna smiled, the smile she'd perfected in the bathroom mirror, the one that said "I'm sorry for existing in your space. Can I get you anything else?" The woman waved her off like smoke. Sienna retreated, her reflection catching in the gilded mirrors that lined Castellano's walls. Dark skin gleaming with sweat. Hair pulled back in a bun so tight it gave her headaches. The regulation black slacks and white button-down that every server wore, making them a uniform sea of interchangeable bodies. Invisible. The kitchen door swung open with a bang, releasing a cloud of steam and the head chef's creative profanity. Sienna grabbed the water pitcher, always be holding something, always look busy. That was the trick to surviving a shift, and scanned the dining room. That's when she saw him. Table 12, the corner booth reserved for special guests. Vincent Romano sat like a king holding court, his presence commanding the space in a way that had nothing to do with volume and everything to do with gravity. He was maybe 40, with the kind of sharp features that would have been handsome if they weren't so cold. Dark hair silvering at the temples. A suit that probably cost more than Sienna made in 6 months, charcoal grey, and fitted perfectly to his athletic frame. But it wasn't his appearance that made Sienna's instincts prickle. It was the way everyone in the restaurant had subtly reoriented themselves around him. The maître d' hovering nearby. The other servers giving table 12 a wide berth. The general manager who never left his office had emerged to shake Vincent's hand, his smile tight and nervous. 3 men sat with Vincent, all cut from the same expensive cloth. They spoke in low tones, heads bent together like a photograph from a mob movie. One of them, thick-necked, with scarred knuckles resting on the white tablecloth, looked up and caught Sienna staring. She dropped her gaze immediately, heat flooding her cheeks. "Stupid. Don't look at them. Don't be noticed." Sienna. Marco, the floor manager, appeared at her elbow, his hand clamping around her arm. "Table 12 needs service. Where's Christina?" "Bathroom, I think." "Then you're up." He pushed her forward, his grip tight enough to bruise. "And for God's sake, be pleasant. Those men are important." The way he said important made Sienna's stomach drop. She approached table 12 with the water pitcher held before her like a shield. Vincent Romano didn't look up as she neared, but she felt his awareness of her like heat from a flame. The conversation at the table died. "Good evening, gentlemen." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Macallan 25, Vincent said, still not looking at her. His voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest trace of a New York accent. "Neat." "Same," said the scarred man, his eyes traveling over Sienna in a way that made her skin crawl. She took the rest of their orders, more expensive whiskey, a bottle of wine that she knew cost $1,400, and escaped back to the bar. "Romano's here," the bartender, Jeff, muttered as he poured the Macallan with trembling hands. "Christ. I heard he owns half the restaurants in the city." "Owns them?" Sienna asked. Jeff gave her a look that said she was either naive or stupid. Let's just say you don't say no when Vincent Romano makes you an offer. You know the Italian place that closed last month on 7th? Owner tried to refuse Romano's partnership. Place burned down 3 days later. Sienna's blood went cold. She'd read about that fire. 1 person died. Here. Jeff shoved the drinks at her. And Sienna? Whatever you hear at that table, and I mean whatever, you didn't hear it. Understand? She nodded, mouth dry. The tray felt heavier as she carried it back to table 12. Vincent had leaned back in his seat, one arm draped over the booth's edge, entirely relaxed in the way that apex predators are relaxed. He was speaking, and his companions listened with the intensity of students before a professor who graded in life and death. Problem solved by Friday, Vincent was saying as Sienna approached. I don't care if you have to. He stopped as she set down the first glass. Sienna worked quickly, efficiently, trying to blend into the wallpaper. But as she placed Vincent's Macallan in front of him, her sleeve caught the edge of the glass. Time slowed. The whiskey tilted, amber liquid sloshing toward the rim. Her hand shot out, steadying it before a single drop spilled. For the first time, Vincent Romano looked directly at her. His eyes were grey, the color of winter storms, and absolutely merciless. Sienna found herself frozen, a rabbit before a wolf, unable to look away even as every instinct screamed at her to run. Good reflexes, Vincent said quietly. I'm so sorry, sir. The words tumbled out. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. He dismissed her with a glance, returning to his conversation. But as Sienna hurried away, her heart hammering against her ribs, she heard him continue, handling the Rivera shipment. The warehouse on Dock Street. Make sure our friend at the precinct understands that any interruptions would be unfortunate for his career. Sienna's feet stumbled. Shipment. Dock Street. Friend at the precinct. She wasn't supposed to hear that. Jeff's warning echoed in her skull. Whatever you hear, you didn't hear it. The rest of the shift blurred. Sienna moved through it on autopilot, smiling her invisible smile, pouring water and delivering plates. But she felt the weight of Vincent Romano's presence at table 12 like a physical thing, a black hole warping the space around it. At 1 a.m., after the last patron had left and the closing duties were done, Sienna counted her tips in the break room. $83. Combined with her hourly wage, barely enough to cover the rent due tomorrow and the electricity bill due Friday. Not enough for groceries or the phone bill or the medical debt that followed her like a shadow. Not enough. Never enough. She pulled on her second-hand coat and stepped out into the November cold. The city hummed around her. New York never slept, just changed its costume. The late-night crowd, drunk stumbling from bars, night shift workers trudging home, taxis prowling for fares. Sienna lived 40 minutes away by subway, in a neighborhood where the streetlights were always broken and the sound of sirens was a lullaby. But tonight, her usual train wasn't running, track maintenance, the sign said, so she had to walk 12 blocks to the next station. The streets grew emptier. Her breath puffed white in the air. Her sneakers slapped against concrete still dirty with the remnants of yesterday's snow. She was 3 blocks from the station when she heard the voices. They came from an alley to her left, low, angry, urgent. Sienna knew better than to look. In this neighborhood, you kept your head down and your pace quick. You didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, didn't. A gunshot cracked through the night. Sienna's body reacted before her mind could, diving behind a parked car. Her heart hammered so loud she was sure whoever was in that alley could hear it. She pressed herself against the cold metal, trying to become small, invisible, like she'd learned to be at Castellanos. More voices. Shouting. Another shot. Then, footsteps, running, growing closer. A man burst from the alley, young, maybe 25, clutching his side where dark blood seeped between his fingers. His eyes were wide with terror and pain. He saw Sienna crouched behind the car. "Help," he gasped. "Please." 2 more men emerged from the alley. One of them Sienna recognized, the scarred man from table 12. Her blood turned to ice. The scarred man raised his gun, a casual motion, like swatting a fly, and fired. The young man crumpled to the pavement 3 feet from Sienna, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes going glassy and still. Sienna couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't do anything but stare at the dead man and the spreading pool of red that was creeping toward her shoes. "Clean this up," the scarred man said to his companion. "Romano wants it done quiet." Romano. That's when Sienna's phone, tucked in her coat pocket, buzzed with a text notification. The sound was small, insignificant. But in the terrible silence of the street, it might as well have been a scream. The scarred man's head snapped toward her hiding spot. Their eyes met across the distance, his flat and reptilian, hers wide with terror. "Well," he said, his voice almost pleasant. "Looks like we got a witness." Sienna ran. Her body moved on pure survival instinct, legs pumping before her brain could catch up with the reality of what was happening. Behind her, she heard the scarred man shout, a bark of command that sent his partner running after her. The streets of New York became a blur. Sienna's sneakers slapped against concrete, her breath coming in ragged gasps that burned her lungs. She'd grown up in these neighborhoods, knew them like the back of her hand, and that knowledge was the only thing keeping her alive. She cut through an alley, vaulted over a pile of trash bags, emerged onto a side street. Her pursuer was bigger, but she was faster, fueled by terror that made her body forget about exhaustion. Left. Right. Through the parking lot. Over the fence. Her hand scraped against chain link, denim tearing on metal barbs, but she barely felt it. She could hear him behind her, heavy footfalls, labored breathing. Getting closer. "I'm going to die. I'm going to die like that man in the street." She burst onto a wider avenue, stumbled into the path of a taxi that screeched to a halt, horn blaring. The driver cursed at her. Sienna used the moment of confusion to dart across traffic, car horn screaming, and dove into the entrance of an old apartment building. The lobby was empty, mail scattered across cracked tile. She looked around desperately. The elevator was broken, hanging open with its guts exposed. The stairs. She took them 3 at a time, climbing up into the building's dark heart. 3rd floor. 4th. 5th. Her legs were screaming now, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Behind her, the stairwell door crashed open. "You can run all you want, sweetheart," the man's voice echoed up the shaft. "This ends one way." 6th floor. Sienna yanked open the door and stumbled into a hallway that smelled of mold and old cooking grease. Apartments lined both sides, their doors closed, their occupants either asleep or smart enough not to get involved. She tried a door handle. Locked. Another. Locked. She was leaving a trail of blood from her scraped hands, making herself easy to track. Think. Think. End of the hallway. A window. Fire escape visible beyond. Sienna ran for it, fingers scrabbling at the old frame. It was painted shut, decades of layers sealing it closed. She could hear footsteps in the stairwell now, getting closer. With a sob of desperation, she slammed her elbow into the glass. It shattered, the sound impossibly loud. Cold air rushed in. Sienna knocked out the remaining shards and squeezed through, her coat catching, then tearing free. The fire escape was rust-eaten and rickety, groaning under her weight as she climbed. Up. She went up instead of down, counterintuitive, but it might buy her seconds. The roof access was a metal ladder bolted to the brick, rungs slippery with ice. She was halfway up when her pursuer reached the window. "Got you now," he panted, gun rising. Sienna didn't think. She grabbed a loose brick from the roof's edge and hurled it down. It caught him in the shoulder, not hard enough to stop him, but enough to make him stumble, his shot going wide. The bullet sparked off metal somewhere to her left. Sienna hauled herself onto the roof and ran again, leaping across the 3-foot gap to the next building. The city sprawled below her, a canyon of lights and shadow. One wrong step meant a 6-story fall. Her sneakers skidded on icy gravel, arms windmilling for balance. Behind her, she heard the man climbing, cursing, getting closer. The next gap was wider, maybe 5 feet. Too far. No way she could make it. Sienna spun, looking for another option. Fire escape on the far side of the roof. If she could reach it. A hand closed around her ankle. She went down hard, gravel biting into her palms, air exploding from her lungs. The man had caught up, was dragging her backward, his grip iron strong. Sienna kicked, her free foot connecting with something soft. He grunted, grip loosening for just a second. It was enough. She twisted free, rolled, and came up with a broken piece of pipe she'd spotted near the roof's edge. The man was advancing, gun raised, His face twisted with anger. Blood trickled from his nose where her kick had landed. "You're just making this harder on yourself," he said. "Good," Sienna heard herself say. She swung the pipe with everything she had. It connected with his wrist, a sickening crack. The gun went flying, skittering across the roof. The man howled, clutching his arm. Sienna didn't wait. She ran for the fire escape, practically falling down the ladder, metal rungs burning her palms. Second floor. First. She dropped the last 6 feet to the alley below, landed badly, her ankle screaming in protest. Behind her, she heard the man yelling into a phone, "Lost her on Lexington and 34th. Send everyone. I want that bitch found." Everyone. Sienna limped out of the alley onto a street that was busier, more witnesses, more cameras. Safer. But she knew it was temporary. They were hunting her now. Romano's men. And she'd heard enough at Table 12 to know they had resources. Money, connections, cops on their payroll. What do I do? Police? They own police. Run. They'll find me. Hide? Where? Her apartment wasn't safe. They'd seen her at Castellano's. Probably knew her name from the staff list. Friends? The only person she was close to was her neighbor Mrs. Chen, a 70-year-old grandmother who Sienna sometimes bought groceries for. She couldn't drag her into this. Sienna's phone buzzed again. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Unknown number. We need to talk. The parking garage behind St. Patrick's Cathedral. 20 minutes. Come alone or don't come at all. VR. Vincent Romano. Her first instinct was to throw the phone away and keep running. But where would she run to? How long before they found her? A day? An hour? And that message, "We need to talk," didn't sound like a death threat. It sounded like, what? A negotiation? Sienna looked down at herself. Coat torn. Hands bleeding. Jeans ripped at the knee. She was shaking from adrenaline and cold, and her ankle was swelling inside her ruined sneaker. She thought about the dead man in the street. Thought about the scarred man's flat, reptilian eyes. Thought about Vincent Romano sitting in his booth at Castellano's, commanding the room without raising his voice. You're already dead if you run. Maybe if you talk, there's a chance. It was the thinnest of hopes, but it was all she had. 20 minutes later, Sienna stood in the dim parking garage behind St. Patrick's Cathedral, her breath misting in the cold. The space was nearly empty at 2 a.m., just a handful of cars and too many shadows. Above, the Gothic spires of the cathedral reached toward a sky choked with light pollution. She heard the car before she saw it, a black Mercedes, sleek and expensive, pulling up with barely a whisper of sound. It stopped 10 feet from where she stood. The rear door opened. Vincent Romano stepped out. He looked exactly as he had at the restaurant, immaculate suit, perfect composure, except now his grey eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made Sienna want to flee. 2 men emerged from the front of the car, standing at attention. Not the scarred man, she noted with relief. Vincent approached slowly, hands in his pockets, casual as a Sunday stroll. "Miss Washington," he said. "You led Anthony on quite a chase." "Anthony." Her voice came out hoarse. "The man you hit with a pipe. Broken wrist. He's very upset." Vincent stopped a few feet away, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You're resourceful. I respect that. Are you going to kill me?" The question tumbled out before Sienna could stop it. Something flickered in Vincent's expression. Amusement, maybe, or surprise. "That depends entirely on you. What did you see tonight?" Sienna's mind raced. Lie? Tell the truth? What answer kept her alive? "A man was shot," she said carefully. "In the street. I didn't see who did it. Don't insult my intelligence." Vincent's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "You saw Anthony. You heard me at the restaurant. You're a witness to murder and conspiracy. That makes you a very dangerous woman, Miss Washington." "I won't say anything. I swear. I just want to go home and forget this ever happened." "Home?" Vincent smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "You mean your studio apartment on East 118th? The one with the broken heater and the landlord who's threatening eviction?" Sienna's blood went cold. He knew where she lived. Of course he did. I did my research while you were running across rooftops, Vincent continued. Sienna Washington, age 27. Orphaned at 14. Dropped out of community college to work full-time. 2 jobs, Castellanos and a coffee shop on weekday mornings. $83,000 in medical debt from your mother's cancer treatment. No family. No significant other. No one who would notice if you disappeared. Each word was a nail in a coffin. Sienna felt her legs trembling, the adrenaline finally crashing, leaving her hollow and terrified. Please, she whispered. I won't tell anyone. I'll leave the city. You'll never see me again. You're right. I won't. Vincent reached into his jacket. Sienna flinched, certain he was pulling a gun. Instead, he produced a business card and held it out to her. She stared at it, not understanding. Take it, he said. With shaking fingers, she did. The card was heavy stock, embossed with gold lettering, Romano Enterprises and a phone number. I'm offering you a choice, Miss Washington, Vincent said. Option 1. I let you walk away. You leave New York tonight with $5,000 cash and a head start. But understand, if you ever speak about what you saw, if you ever come back to this city, if you ever become a liability to my organization, I will find you. And it won't be quick. Sienna's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. And option 2. Vincent's gray eyes held hers. You work for me. The words hung in the cold air between them. Work for you. Sienna repeated, certain she'd heard wrong. You're invisible, Miss Washington. People like those at Castellanos? They look right through you. That's useful. And tonight, you showed me you can think under pressure. You survived when you should have died. He paused. I have need of someone with your particular talents. Talents? Sienna almost laughed, a hysterical sound that died in her throat. I'm a waitress. You're a survivor. There's a difference. Vincent took a step closer. Here's what I'm offering, a job in my organization. Real pay, $50,000 to start, more as you prove yourself. A safe apartment. Protection. All your debts cleared within 6 months. $50,000. Sienna made $22,000 a year, and most of that went to interest on debt. $50,000 was... It was impossible. What would I have to do? She asked. Learn. Watch. Report back to me. Eventually, more specialized work. Vincent's expression was unreadable. I won't lie to you. It's dangerous. The life expectancy in my business isn't great. But you're already in danger, Miss Washington. Anthony wants you dead. So does his partner. So do the 3 other men who know you saw what happened tonight. Working for me is the only thing keeping you alive. That's not a choice. That's a threat. No. Vincent's voice was soft but absolute. A threat would be putting a bullet in your head right now and dumping your body in the river. This is an opportunity. Take it or don't, but decide quickly. My patience has limits. Sienna looked down at the card in her hand. Heavy. Expensive. Real. She thought about her apartment with its broken heater. Thought about counting tips and coming up short. Thought about being invisible, furniture that breathed, apologizing for existing. Thought about the dead man in the street, his eyes going glassy, his blood spreading across concrete. That could have been her. Should have been her. By every law of probability, she should be dead right now. But she wasn't. If I say yes, she said slowly, I want something else. Vincent raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating. You said I'm resourceful. Sienna lifted her chin, meeting his gaze despite the fear coursing through her. I want my name. I want people to see me. Not as furniture. Not as invisible. If I'm going to risk my life for you, I want respect. For a long moment, Vincent just looked at her. Then, incredibly, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from cold marble to something almost human. Done, he said. Welcome to the family, Miss Washington. He extended his hand. Sienna stared at it. This man's hand, this criminal's hand, this lifeline disguised as a devil's bargain. Every rational part of her brain screamed to run. To take the $5,000 and disappear. To go back to being invisible where it was safe. But safety was an illusion. She'd learned that tonight. And maybe Maybe being visible was worth the risk. Sienna reached out and shook Vincent Romano's hand. His grip was firm, warm despite the cold. My driver will take you somewhere safe tonight. Tomorrow, your new life begins. Any questions? Just one. Sienna's voice was steadier now. The man who was killed tonight. Who was he? Vincent's expression went cold again, shuttered. Someone who stole from me. Someone who thought he could betray the family and live. He was wrong. He leaned closer, and Sienna smelled his cologne, expensive, subtle. Let that be your first lesson, Miss Washington. Loyalty is everything. Betray me, and you'll end up like him. Serve me well, and I'll give you everything you've ever wanted. He turned and walked back to his car, his men falling into step behind him. At the door, he paused. Oh, and Sienna. He looked back at her. Lose the fear. Fear makes you weak. In this world, weakness gets you killed. The Mercedes pulled away, leaving Sienna standing alone in the garage with a business card, torn clothes, and the weight of a choice that would change everything. Above her, the cathedral bells began to toll. 3 a.m. The hour of ghosts and new beginnings. Sienna Washington, the invisible waitress, had just died. What would rise in her place, she didn't yet know. But she was about to find out. The apartment Vincent's men took her to wasn't just safe, it was a different universe. Sienna stood in the doorway of the penthouse, her ruined sneakers sinking into carpet so plush it felt like walking on clouds. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, transforming New York into a constellation of lights. The furniture was modern, expensive, the kind she'd only seen in magazines left behind at Castellano's. A kitchen with marble countertops. A bedroom with a bed that could fit 4 people. A bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. Mr. Romano said to make yourself comfortable. The driver, a man named Joseph with kind eyes and a shoulder holster, had told her. Someone will come for you at 9 a.m. Get some rest. Rest. As if she could sleep after everything that had happened. But when Sienna finally crawled into that enormous bed at 4 a.m., exhaustion pulled her under like a riptide. She dreamed of blood on concrete, of grey eyes watching her, of her mother's voice saying, "Baby, sometimes the only way out is through." A knock on the door woke her at 8:30. Sienna stumbled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's torn clothes, and found a woman standing in the hallway. She was maybe 50, black, with silver-streaked hair pulled into an elegant bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Good morning, Miss Washington. I'm Grace Thompson, Mr. Romano's. Let's call me his executive assistant." Her smile was professional but not unkind. "We have a lot to do today. First, breakfast. Then shopping. Then your education begins." Education. Sienna's voice was rough with sleep. "You can't learn this business looking like you've been in a street fight." Grace's eyes traveled over Sienna's appearance. "No offense." "Some taken," Sienna muttered, but she followed Grace inside. Over coffee and pastries that tasted like heaven, Grace laid out the plan. New clothes, the kind that would let Sienna blend into high society. New phone, encrypted. New identity documents, just in case. And then, training. Training in what? Sienna asked. Everything. How to read people. How to lie convincingly. Self-defense. Weapons. The structure of Mr. Romano's organization. The rules that keep you alive. Grace poured more coffee. "You're starting from scratch, which is both good and bad. Good because you have no bad habits. Bad because you have no habits at all." "I survived last night," Sienna pointed out. "You got lucky last night. Luck runs out." Grace's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. This life? It's not a game. People die. Good people, bad people, doesn't matter. If you're going to survive, you need to be smart, quick, and absolutely clear about what you're willing to do." "What I'm willing to do," Sienna repeated. "You mean kill people?" "I mean protect yourself. Protect the family. Make hard choices." Grace stood, brushing croissant crumbs from her impeccable suit. "Come on. Shopping first. Philosophy later." The next 6 hours were a whirlwind. Grace took her to boutiques where the staff knew Grace by name and didn't blink when she handed over Vincent's black card. Sienna stood in dressing rooms wearing clothes that cost more than her monthly rent, tailored pants, silk blouses, a leather jacket that felt like butter, heels that made her legs look endless. You need to look the part, Grace explained. In Mr. Romano's world, appearance is armor. It tells people who you are before you open your mouth. Sienna stared at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was someone else, polished, put together, powerful. Not the invisible waitress who apologized for existing. Who am I supposed to be? She asked. That's up to you, Grace said. But whoever she is, she needs to command respect. By the time they returned to the penthouse, Sienna had a new wardrobe, new phone, and a head spinning with information. Grace had talked non-stop about Romano's organization, about the families that controlled different territories, about the delicate balance of power that kept the city from descending into all-out war. Mr. Romano runs the East Side, Grace explained. Imports, exports, several legitimate businesses that facilitate other activities. He has arrangements with the Italians in Brooklyn, the Russians in Brighton Beach, the Irish in Hell's Kitchen. Everyone stays in their lane, everyone makes money, everyone stays alive. And if someone doesn't stay in their lane? Sienna asked. Grace's expression went dark. That's what Anthony does. He's Mr. Romano's enforcer. The man you saw killed last night? He was skimming from a shipment. In this business, theft is betrayal. Betrayal is death. The words settled heavy in Sienna's stomach. At 6 p.m., Vincent arrived. He swept into the penthouse like he owned it, which, Sienna supposed, he did. He changed from last night's suit into something more casual, dark jeans, a black sweater that probably cost more than a car. But his eyes were the same, sharp, assessing, missing nothing. Miss Washington. He nodded to her. You clean up well. Sienna stood in her new clothes, black pants, emerald silk blouse, heels that made her nearly his height. Thank you. Grace has been briefing you. Yes. Good. Vincent moved to the windows, looking out over the city he controlled. Tomorrow, your real education begins. But tonight, you're coming with me. Sienna's pulse quickened. Where? Dinner. There's someone you need to meet. The restaurant was in Little Italy, a place called Salvatore's that looked modest from the outside but hummed with hidden power. Vincent's hand, warm and possessive, rested on the small of Sienna's back as he guided her inside. Every eye in the room turned to them. Sienna felt the weight of their stares, but this time it was different. They weren't looking through her. They were looking at her, at the woman walking beside Vincent Romano, at the confidence in her spine, at the expensive clothes that marked her as someone who mattered. She was visible. Vincent. A man rose from a corner table, older, maybe 60, with white hair and a face like weathered leather. And who is this beautiful creature? Carlo Rossetti. Meet Sienna Washington. She'll be working with us. Vincent's tone was easy, but Sienna heard the warning underneath. This woman is under my protection. Carlo's eyes, dark and cunning, traveled over Sienna. A pleasure, Miss Washington. Any friend of Vincent's is a friend of mine. They sat, and wine was poured, something red and expensive that tasted like velvet. Sienna sipped carefully, hyper-aware that she was being evaluated. Not just by Carlo, but by the other men at the table, Carlo's sons, his lieutenant, all of them measuring her worth. So, Sienna, Carlo said, leaning back in his chair. Vincent tells me you're quick on your feet. Resourceful. These are good qualities in our line of work. Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Please, call me Carlo. His smile was almost grandfatherly. Tell me, where are you from? Your people. It was a test, Sienna realized. Asking about her background, her connections, trying to place her in the city's complex web of power and loyalty. Brooklyn, she said. Born and raised. No family left. My mother passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. Carlo's sympathy seemed genuine. Family is everything. Without it, we're nothing. He glanced at Vincent. Which is why I'm confused, my friend. You bring me this lovely woman, tell me she's joining your organization, but you don't tell me her role. What does Miss Washington do for you? The table went quiet. Vincent set down his wine glass with deliberate care. She does whatever I need her to do. And that's all anyone needs to know. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Carlo's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went flat. Of course. I meant no disrespect. None taken. Vincent's voice was pleasant steel. Now, shall we discuss business? The shipment from Marseille arrives Thursday. I trust your distribution channels are ready. The conversation moved to logistics, shipping routes, payment schedules, territories. Sienna listened, absorbing everything. She was learning that this world had its own language, its own rules. Everything was coded, nothing said directly. Shipment meant drugs or guns or something equally illegal. Distribution channels meant dealers and corrupt officials. Ready meant greased palms and bought loyalty. And threaded through it all was violence, casual as breathing. Problem with the Irish, one of Carlo's sons was saying. They're pushing into our territory on the docks. Handle it, Carlo said simply. How permanent? The son asked. Send a message. Nothing fatal. Not yet. Carlo waved his hand like he was discussing the weather. Just remind them that agreements have consequences. Sienna kept her face neutral, but her stomach churned. These men were talking about hurting people, maybe killing people, like it was just another business decision. Vincent's hand found hers under the table. His grip was firm, grounding. When she glanced at him, his expression was calm, but she saw the question in his eyes. Can you handle this? Sienna squeezed back. Yes. After dinner, Vincent walked her outside. The November air was cold and sharp, clearing her head. You did well in there, he said. I barely spoke. Exactly. You listened. Observed. Didn't ask stupid questions or show fear. Vincent studied her face. Carlo was testing you. Testing me, really, seeing if I'd made a mistake bringing you in. You passed. What happens when I don't pass? Sienna asked. Let's not find out. Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Get in the car. We need to go. What's wrong? Anthony found out you're still alive. He's not happy about it. The warehouse was on the docks, exactly where Sienna had heard Vincent mention that first night at Castellano's. They arrived in a convoy, 3 cars, 8 men, all of them armed. Vincent moved through them like a general through his army, absolute in his authority. Inside, Anthony waited. The scarred man looked worse than Sienna remembered. His wrist was in a cast, his face mottled with bruises, and his eyes burned with hatred when he saw her. You've got to be kidding me, he snarled, starting forward. You're protecting this bitch? She should be dead. Anthony. Vincent's voice cracked like a whip. Stand down. She's a witness. She saw everything. She could. She works for me now. Vincent's tone invited no argument. Which means she's family. Touch her, and you touch me. Are we clear? Anthony's face went red, veins bulging in his neck. For a terrifying moment, Sienna thought he might actually attack Vincent. But then he saw something in Vincent's eyes, something cold and absolute, and he backed down. We're clear, he muttered. Good. Vincent turned to Sienna. Anthony, apologize to Miss Washington. The silence that followed was electric. You want me to apologize? Anthony's voice was strangled. To her. She broke your wrist in self-defense. You were trying to kill her. Seems like you got off easy. Vincent's smile was knife-sharp. Now apologize, or I'll break your other wrist myself. Anthony looked like he'd swallowed glass. But he turned to Sienna, jaw clenched so tight she could hear his teeth grinding. Sorry, he forced out. For what? Vincent prompted. For trying to kill you. Each word clearly caused Anthony physical pain. Sienna looked at this man who'd chased her across rooftops, who'd raised his gun to execute her, who now stood before her humiliated and furious. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something else entirely. Power. Apology accepted, she said calmly. Vincent nodded, satisfied. Anthony, you're reassigned. Brooklyn operations. Report to Carlo's crew. You'll stay there until I decide you've learned some discipline. It was a demotion, and everyone knew it. Anthony's face went from red to white. Vincent. That's Mr. Romano to you now. Dismissed. Anthony left like a kicked dog, his remaining pride in tatters. The other men watched him go with varying expressions, some sympathetic, others gleeful at his fall from grace. When they were alone, Vincent turned to Sienna. You need to understand something. What I just did. That wasn't kindness. It was strategy. I don't understand, Sienna said. Anthony is dangerous. Humiliating him makes him more dangerous. But now everyone saw me choose you over him, saw me enforce your position in the family. That protection is real, but it comes with a price. Vincent stepped closer. You're mine now, Sienna. My responsibility, my asset, my soldier. When I give an order, you follow it. When I tell you to jump, you ask how high. When I send you into danger, you go. Because the protection I just gave you, it only lasts as long as you're useful to me. His grey eyes bored into hers. Are we clear? Sienna thought about her studio apartment with the broken heater. Thought about being invisible. Thought about the dead man in the street, his life ended with casual cruelty. Thought about Anthony's face when he'd been forced to apologize. She thought about power. Crystal clear, she said. Mr. Romano. Something flickered in Vincent's expression. Approval, maybe, or satisfaction. Good. He pulled out his phone. Grace will pick you up tomorrow at 7 a.m. Your training starts properly. Combat, weapons, intelligence gathering. You've got potential, Sienna, but potential isn't enough. I need you sharp. I'll be ready. See that you are. Vincent headed for his car, then paused. Oh, and Sienna? What you did tonight, standing up to Anthony's hatred without flinching. That took guts. Don't lose that. He drove away, leaving Sienna standing in the warehouse with the weight of her new life settling around her like a cloak. 3 months later, Sienna moved through the training room like water, smooth, fluid, unstoppable. Her instructor, a former Marine named Jackson, circled her with a knife, looking for an opening. He lunged. Sienna sidestepped, caught his wrist, used his momentum to flip him onto his back. The knife clattered away. She had her own blade at his throat before he could blink. Dead, she said. Jackson laughed, breathless. Damn, girl. You've got a gift for this. 3 months of training had transformed her. She could shoot, fight, pick locks, tail a target without being spotted. Grace had taught her to read people, to spot lies, to manipulate conversations. Vincent himself had shown her the organizational structure, the money flows, the pressure points that kept his empire running. And somewhere along the way, Sienna had stopped being afraid. Mr. Romano wants to see you. Grace appeared in the doorway. It's time. Sienna cleaned up, changed into fitted black pants and a silk blouse, her armor now, her second skin. She met Vincent in his office, a penthouse suite in a building he owned in Midtown. He sat behind a massive desk, paperwork spread before him, but looked up when she entered. Sienna. Sit. She did, meeting his gaze evenly. Their relationship had evolved over 3 months. He was still her boss, still dangerous, still absolutely in control. But something had shifted. He trusted her now, relied on her. And she'd proven herself valuable, smart, ruthless, when necessary, loyal. I have a job for you, Vincent said. Carlo Rossetti is stealing from me. Sienna's eyebrows rose. The man from dinner. The same. He thinks I don't notice, skimming from shipments, inflating his costs, pocketing the difference. It's disrespectful. Vincent's voice was calm, but she heard the anger underneath. I need proof. Hard evidence I can use to confront him. You want me to infiltrate his operation. I want you to get close to his son, Marco. He's the one handling the logistics. Get into his inner circle, earn his trust, and find out exactly how much his father is stealing. It was dangerous. If Carlo discovered what she was doing, she'd end up dead. But it was also opportunity, a chance to prove herself, to move up in Vincent's organization. Consider it done, Sienna said. Vincent smiled. I knew I could count on you. He stood, moved around the desk, leaned against it in front of her. You've exceeded every expectation, Sienna. When I first met you, You were terrified, running for your life. Now look at you, confident, capable, dangerous. You've become exactly what I needed. I'm just doing my job. It's more than that. Vincent's hand reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, surprising. You're special, Sienna Washington. Don't ever forget that. His touch lingered, warm against her skin. Sienna's pulse quickened. Over 3 months, she'd learned to read Vincent, to anticipate his needs, to understand the man behind the cold exterior. And she discovered something unexpected. He wasn't just her boss. He was magnetic. Dangerous and magnetic and utterly compelling. Vincent, she said quietly, what are we doing here? Building an empire, he said. And you're going to help me rule it. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. The office felt suddenly small, the air charged with something electric. This job with Carlo, Vincent continued. Complete it successfully, and I'm promoting you. You'll be my right hand, my most trusted advisor. But Sienna. His grey eyes held hers. In this world, trust is earned in blood. Show me you're willing to do what's necessary. Show me you're not just playing at being dangerous. What do you need me to do? Whatever it takes. If Marco trusts you, use that. If you need to seduce him, do it. If you need to kill him to get the evidence, he paused. Can you do that? Can you kill someone if I ask you to? The question hung between them. 3 months ago, Sienna would have said no. Would have been horrified at the suggestion. But 3 months of living in Vincent's world had changed her. She'd seen what happened to people who showed weakness. She'd learned that survival meant making hard choices. And she discovered something dark inside herself, a capacity for violence she'd never known existed. Yes, she said. If it protects the family, I can do whatever's necessary. Vincent's smile was proud, possessive. That's my girl. He kissed her then, not gentle, but claiming, his hand tangling in her hair, pulling her close. Sienna kissed him back, tasting power and danger and something she couldn't name. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent's eyes had darkened. Complete this job, he said. And then we'll talk about what comes next. For both of us. Sienna left Vincent's office with her mission clear and her heart racing. As the elevator descended, she caught her reflection in the polished doors. The woman staring back was someone she barely recognized from 6 months ago. What would you do for power? For survival? How far would you go to stop being invisible? She was about to find out. Marco Rossetti was easier to infiltrate than Sienna expected. She found him at a club in Soho, one of the high-end places where the city's wealthy and connected came to play. Sienna wore a dress that hugged every curve, blood-red silk that made her skin glow, heels that put her at eye level with most men. Her hair fell in waves down her back. Diamond earrings, a gift from Vincent, caught the light. She wasn't invisible anymore. Marco spotted her at the bar. He was handsome in that privileged way, sharp suit, confident smile, the easy charm of someone who'd never been told no. 28, according to Grace's intel. Carlo's youngest son and his favorite. Smart but arrogant. Ambitious but sloppy. Perfect. I haven't seen you here before, Marco said, sliding onto the stool beside her. Sienna glanced at him, let her eyes linger just long enough to show interest. First time. Friend recommended it. Good friend. I'm Marco. Sienna. She shook his hand, her grip firm. You come here often? That sounded less cliché in my head. He laughed, genuine, warm. Every Friday. Helps me unwind from the week. What do you do, Sienna? Consulting, she said smoothly. It was the cover story they'd crafted, independent business consultant, specializing in logistics and supply chain management. Close enough to the truth to be believable. Import-export optimization. Mostly. Very boring unless you're into spreadsheets. I'm actually in that business myself, Marco said, eyes brightening. My family runs shipping operations. Maybe we could compare notes sometime. Hook, line, sinker. I'd like that, Sienna said, smiling. Over the next 3 weeks, Sienna became a fixture in Marco's life. Dinners at expensive restaurants. Late-night drinks at his favorite haunts. Long conversations about business that let her probe his operation while seeming genuinely interested. He was smitten. She could see it in how he looked at her, how he found excuses to touch her hand, how he talked about introducing her to his family. And slowly, carefully, she gathered her intelligence. Marco was sloppy with his phone, leaving it unlocked on tables. Sienna memorized passwords, account numbers, shipping manifests. He kept files in his apartment, a penthouse in Tribeca that he invited her to after their 4th date. While he made drinks, she photographed documents with the camera hidden in her bracelet. The evidence was damning. Carlo was skimming 30% off the top of every shipment from Vincent, cooking the books to hide it. Over 2 years, he'd stolen nearly $3 million. It was enough to start a war. "You're brilliant at this," Vincent told her when she delivered her report. They were in his office again, late at night. The city sprawled below them like a kingdom. Carlo won't be able to deny this. The question is how we handle it. "What are the options?" Sienna asked. "Option 1. I confront him privately, force him to return the money and accept a demotion. Peaceful but weak, others might see it as me going soft." Vincent paced, his mind clearly working through scenarios. Option 2. I go public, humiliate him in front of the other families, take his territory. Sends a strong message but risks destabilizing our arrangements. And option 3. Vincent's eyes met hers. Carlo dies. Marco takes over, young, inexperienced, easy to control. I absorb most of his operation, leave him the scraps. Demonstrates that betrayal has ultimate consequences. The room fell silent. "You want me to kill him?" Sienna said. "It wasn't a question. I want you to be ready to. If it comes to that." Vincent moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "This is the moment, Sienna. The test. Can you do what's necessary? Can you put the family above everything else?" Sienna thought about Carlo, grandfatherly Carlo with his warm smile and his easy charm. Thought about putting a bullet in his head. Could she do it? 3 months ago, the answer would have been no. Now? "If you give the order," she said quietly, "I'll do it." Vincent's hand cupped her face, proud and possessive. "You've become everything I hoped you would be. Strong. Ruthless. Loyal." His thumb traced her lips. "Mine." He kissed her then, fierce and claiming, and Sienna kissed him back. This man who'd saved her and enslaved her, who'd given her power and taken her freedom, who she hated and needed in equal measure. When they broke apart, Vincent's expression was serious. "Tomorrow night. Carlo's having a private meeting at Salvatore's, just him and his top lieutenants. I'm invited, and you're coming with me. We'll confront him there, see how he reacts." His grey eyes hardened. "And Sienna? Bring your gun. Just in case." Salvatore's back room was thick with cigar smoke and tension. Carlo sat at the head of the table, his sons flanking him, his lieutenants spread around. Vincent entered like he owned the place, because in many ways, he did. Sienna followed 2 steps behind, her hand resting lightly on the purse that concealed her weapon. "Vincent." Carlo's smile was broad, but his eyes were wary. "And the lovely Sienna. What brings you to our little gathering?" "Business, Carlo. Always business." Vincent took a seat uninvited, gesturing for Sienna to stand behind him, a position of both protection and power. "I've been reviewing our accounts. Found some interesting discrepancies." The temperature in the room dropped. "Discrepancies?" Carlo's voice remained light, but his hand had moved to rest on the table, close to where Sienna knew he kept a gun in a hidden drawer. $3 million worth of discrepancies. Money that should have made it to my accounts but somehow didn't. Vincent pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. "Care to explain?" Carlo didn't open the folder. Didn't need to. His face had gone very still. "Those are serious accusations, Vincent." "They're facts, Carlo. Backed by shipping manifests, invoices, bank records. All meticulously documented by my very talented associate here." Vincent glanced back at Sienna. "You remember Marco, don't you? He was very helpful. Very forthcoming." Marco's face went white. "Father, I didn't." "Shut up." Carlo's voice was ice. His eyes fixed on Sienna with dawning understanding. You got close to my son. Seduced him for information. I did my job, Sienna said calmly. Your job? Carlo laughed, bitter and harsh. Vincent, you send this woman, this waitress, to spy on my family? You insult me. You insulted me when you stole from me, Vincent said. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. For 2 years, Carlo. 2 years of betrayal. Did you think I wouldn't notice? I was taking what was owed. Carlo stood, his chair scraping back. Around the table, his men tensed. You sit in your tower, counting your money, while my people do the dirty work. We deserve more than scraps. You deserved exactly what we agreed upon. No more, no less. Vincent remained seated, utterly relaxed, the most dangerous position of all. But you got greedy. And now we have a problem. Carlo's hand inched toward the drawer. Don't, Sienna said quietly. Her gun was already out, hidden by her body from the others, but aimed directly at Carlo's chest. Everyone froze. You would shoot me, girl. Carlo's voice was full of contempt. You've been in this life for what, 3 months? You don't have the stomach for real violence. Try me, Sienna said. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was breathing and the distant clatter of the kitchen beyond the closed door. Then Marco stood, his voice shaking. Father, please. Let's just talk about this. We can work something out. Sit down, Carlo snapped. But his hand moved away from the drawer. Vincent stood, buttoning his jacket with deliberate care. Here's what's going to happen, Carlo. You're going to return every dollar you stole. You're going to cut your percentage of future shipments by half. And you're going to publicly acknowledge this arrangement at next week's meeting with the other families. That's humiliation, Carlo said through gritted teeth. You're destroying me. I'm letting you live. Be grateful. Vincent moved toward the door, Sienna backing up with him, gun still trained on Carlo. You have 24 hours to make the first transfer. If the money isn't in my account by tomorrow night, we handle this the permanent way. They were almost to the door when Carlo spoke again. Vincent. One question. Vincent paused. This girl, is she worth starting a war over? Because that's what you're doing. Choosing her over me, over years of partnership. Is she really that valuable? Vincent looked back at Carlo, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled. Carlo, she's worth more than you ever were. They left Salvatore's and got into Vincent's car. The moment the door closed, Sienna's hand started shaking, adrenaline finally catching up with her. She'd held a gun on a made man, threatened one of the most powerful criminals in New York, and somehow survived. You did well, Vincent said, pulling her close. Your hand never wavered. Carlo believed you would shoot him. I would have, Sienna said, and realized it was true. Vincent kissed her temple. I know. That's why I brought you. The driver pulled away from the restaurant, heading back toward Midtown. Sienna watched the city blur past, her heart still racing, her mind replaying every moment. Will Carlo pay? She asked. Maybe. Probably. But even if he does, he's been humiliated. Men like Carlo don't forget that. Vincent's expression was thoughtful. Which is why we need to be prepared for him to make a move. He might come after me, but more likely he'll come after you. Why me? Because you're the one who exposed him. The waitress who made him look like a fool. Vincent's arm tightened around her shoulders. I won't let anything happen to you, Sienna. You're under my protection. But you need to be careful. Trust no one except me and Grace. Keep your gun close. And if Carlo or any of his people approach you. His phone rang, cutting him off. Vincent glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. Yes. His expression changed, shock, then fury so intense it was frightening. When? He demanded. How many? A pause. I'm on my way. He hung up, his jaw clenched so tight Sienna could see the muscle jumping. What happened? She asked. Carlo made his move. But not against us. Vincent's eyes were ice. He hit Grace. Shot her outside her apartment 20 minutes ago. Sienna's world tilted. Is she? She's alive. Barely. They're taking her to SD. Vincent's. Vincent leaned forward to the driver. Hospital. Now. The car accelerated, weaving through traffic with illegal speed. Sienna's mind raced. Grace, who trained her, guided her, become something like a friend in this dark world. Shot because of what Sienna had done. This is my fault, she whispered. No. Vincent's voice was absolute. This is Carlo's fault. And he just signed his own death warrant. They reached the hospital in minutes. Vincent stormed through the emergency room like a hurricane, his presence clearing a path. A doctor met them outside the surgical ward, a small woman with tired eyes and blood on her scrubs. Mr. Romano. Your associate is in surgery now. The bullet pierced her lung, and she's lost a lot of blood. The next few hours are critical. Will she survive? Vincent demanded. We're doing everything we can. It wasn't an answer, and they all knew it. Vincent paced the waiting room like a caged animal while Sienna sat, numb with shock and guilt. Around them, Vincent's men arrived, Joseph, Jackson, others Sienna had trained with. All of them grim-faced, all of them armed. What do you want us to do, boss? Jackson asked. Vincent stopped pacing. His expression was cold, calculated, and absolutely murderous. Find Carlo. Find his sons. Find everyone in his organization who might have pulled that trigger. His voice was soft, deadly. And bring them to me. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary. The men scattered. Sienna stood. Vincent. Don't. He held up a hand. Don't say you're sorry. Don't say it's your fault. Grace knew the risks. We all do. But Carlo. His hands clenched into fists. He broke the rules. You don't target civilians. You don't shoot women who aren't in the game. That's the line, and he crossed it. What are you going to do? Vincent's grey eyes met hers, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. I'm going to end him. And you're going to help me. 3 hours later, Grace came out of surgery. Stable but critical. Unconscious but alive. The doctor said the next 48 hours would determine everything. Vincent stood at her bedside, looking at this woman who'd served him loyally for 15 years. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were gentle as they rested on the bed rail. She's going to survive, he said quietly. Not a hope, a command, as if he could will it into being. Sienna stood beside him, looking at Grace's pale face, the tubes and wires keeping her alive. When this is over, Vincent continued, when Carlo is dead and his organization is ash, Grace gets a choice. She can retire, full pension, protection for life, anything she wants. She's earned it. He looked at Sienna. And you take her place. Me. Sienna's voice was barely a whisper. You've proven yourself. You're smart, ruthless, loyal. Everything I need in a second in command. Vincent turned to face her fully. But first, we finish this. Carlo declared war when he shot Grace. Now we end it. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something predatory entered his expression. They found him. Carlo is at his warehouse in Red Hook, fortified, surrounded by his men, but cornered. Vincent's smile was razor-sharp. He knows I'm coming. This ends tonight. Sienna felt her heart hammering. This was it, the moment that would define everything. Carlo would fight. People would die. And she would be in the center of it. I'm ready, she said. Vincent cupped her face, his touch surprisingly gentle. I know you are. You were always meant for this life, Sienna. You just needed someone to show you. He kissed her, fierce and claiming. Stay close to me tonight. Trust me. And when I give you an order, follow it without question. Can you do that? Yes. Good. He released her, all business now. Then let's go crown a queen. Red Hook at midnight was a wasteland of warehouses and industrial decay. Carlo's building sat on the waterfront, concrete and steel, built like a fortress. Lights blazed inside, and Sienna could see figures moving behind the windows. 40 men, according to Joseph's intel. All armed. All desperate. Vincent's forces surrounded the building. 60 men, better equipped, better trained. But an assault would be bloody. Casualties on both sides. There's another way, Sienna said as they sat in Vincent's car, watching the warehouse. I'm listening. Marco. He's in there with his father, but he doesn't want this war. He told me once that Carlo's ambition was going to destroy their family. What if I could convince him to open a door? Let us in without a fight. Vincent studied her. That would require Marco to betray his father. To choose you over blood. Do you think he would? Sienna thought about the past 3 weeks. Marco had fallen hard for her. She'd seen it in his eyes, heard it in his voice when he talked about their future. He was smitten, maybe even in love. And he was weak where his father was strong. Yes, she said. I think he would. For the right reasons. Then call him. Sienna pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed Marco's number. It rang 3 times before he answered. Sienna. His voice was strained, frightened. Where are you? Outside. With Vincent. No point in lying. Marco, this doesn't have to end in bloodshed. You know your father crossed a line. He shot Grace, an innocent woman. Vincent has every right to be angry. My father was defending our honor. But Marco's voice lacked conviction. Your father was protecting his pride. And now he's going to get everyone in that building killed, including you. Sienna gentled her voice, made it personal. Marco, I care about you. I don't want to see you die tonight. Please. There's a way out of this. Silence on the line. She could hear shouting in the background, Carlo's voice, giving orders. What do you want me to do? Marco finally asked. The loading dock on the south side. Open it in 10 minutes. Let Vincent's men in. Your father can surrender peacefully, and this ends without more bloodshed. He'll never surrender. Then at least you'll survive. Isn't that what matters? Sienna paused. Please, Marco. Do this one thing. For me. For us. Another long silence. 10 minutes, Marco said. South loading dock. The line went dead. Vincent was already on his radio, repositioning his men. If this is a trap. It's not, Sienna said, praying she was right. 10 minutes later, the loading dock door began to rise. Marco stood in the opening, arms raised, showing he was unarmed. Vincent's men swarmed in, moving with military precision. Sienna followed with Vincent, her gun drawn, adrenaline singing through her veins. Inside was chaos. Carlo's men had been positioned throughout the warehouse, but Marco's betrayal had opened a hole in their defenses. Some surrendered immediately, dropping their weapons. Others fired, and the warehouse erupted in gunfire. Sienna stayed close to Vincent as they moved through the carnage. Her training kicked in, clearing corners, watching angles, her gun an extension of her arm. She saw a man raise his weapon toward Vincent's back and didn't hesitate. Her shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Not fatal, but enough. I just shot someone. There was no time to process it. They pushed deeper into the warehouse, following the sound of Carlo's voice, until they reached the office in the back. Carlo stood behind his desk, a gun in his hand, his face twisted with rage. 3 of his lieutenants were with him, including Anthony, the scarred man who'd chased Sienna all those months ago. Vincent. Carlo roared. You brought a war to my door. Turned my own son against me. You brought this on yourself, Vincent said calmly. His own gun was raised, steady. It's over, Carlo. Your men are surrendering. You've lost. Put down the weapon. Never. Carlo's eyes found Sienna. This is your doing, bitch. You destroyed my family. No, Sienna said, her voice surprisingly steady. You did that yourself. Carlo raised his gun toward her. 2 shots rang out simultaneously, Vincent's and Sienna's. Carlo stumbled back, red blooming on his chest, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. He looked down at the blood, then up at them, his expression one of disbelief. I'm. He collapsed, crumpling behind his desk. For a moment, no one moved. Then Anthony lunged, his face contorted with rage, rushing at Sienna with a knife. But Jackson was faster, a single shot, and Anthony went down hard, his knife skittering across the floor. The other lieutenants dropped their weapons, hands raised in surrender. It was over. Vincent moved to Carlo's body, checked for a pulse, then straightened. Dead. Sienna stared at the man she'd just killed. Her first kill, not in self-defense, not in the heat of panic, but deliberate. Calculated. She waited to feel horror, guilt, remorse. Instead, she felt powerful. Secure the building, Vincent ordered his men. Find Marco. And someone get me a cleanup crew. The warehouse emptied as Vincent's forces secured their victory. Vincent turned to Sienna, pulled her close, and kissed her hard. You did it, he said against her lips. You're officially made, Sienna Washington. No longer just my asset. You're my partner. My queen. Queen. The word resonated through her. She looked around at the warehouse, at the men following Vincent's orders, at the empire he'd just expanded with her help. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible. Furniture that breathed. A waitress who no one noticed. Now she stood in a warehouse full of dead bodies and surrendered enemies, having just killed a made man, and she felt more alive than ever. What happens now? She asked. Vincent smiled. Proud, possessive, dangerous. Now? Now we build something bigger. You and me. Together. He was right, Sienna realized. This was just the beginning. She'd been a waitress. But she was about to become so much more. 3 weeks after Carlo Rossetti died, Sienna Washington stood before a mirror in Vincent's penthouse, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Gone was the waitress with the apologetic smile. Gone was the frightened girl running across rooftops. The woman in the mirror wore power-like armor, a tailored black suit that hugged her curves, her natural hair styled in elegant twists that framed her face, diamond studs in her ears that cost more than she used to make in a year. But it was her eyes that had changed most. They were harder now. Knowing. The eyes of someone who'd looked into the abyss and decided to make it her home. You look like a queen, Grace said from the doorway. Sienna turned. Grace had been released from the hospital last week, still moving carefully, still healing. But she was alive, scarred but surviving, like everyone in this business. How do you feel? Sienna asked. Like I got shot. Grace smiled wryly. But I'll live. Thanks to you. Thanks to me? I'm the reason Carlo went after you. No. Carlo made his own choices, and he paid for them. Grace moved into the room, settling carefully on the edge of the bed. Vincent told me what you did at the warehouse. How you convinced Marco to betray his father. How you stood there and put a bullet in Carlo without hesitation. She studied Sienna with those sharp, knowing eyes. That's not something everyone can do, Sienna. Kill without breaking. Maybe I was already broken, Sienna said quietly. Or maybe you were just waiting to be forged. Grace stood, moved to stand beside her at the mirror. 2 black women, survivors both, reflections side by side. I'm retiring. Vincent's giving me a house in the Hamptons, enough money to live comfortably, protection for life. After 15 years, I've earned my exit. Sienna felt a pang of loss. Grace had been her guide, her mentor, the closest thing to family she'd had in this dark world. I'll miss you, she said. I'm not dying, girl. Just relocating. Grace squeezed her shoulder. But this means you're stepping up. Vincent's making it official tonight. You're his second in command. His partner in everything. Do you understand what that means? Power. Responsibility. Target on my back. All of that. But also respect. Fear. The ability to shape this world however you want. Grace's expression grew serious. 6 months ago, you were invisible. Now everyone will see you. Everyone will know your name. That's what you wanted, isn't it? Sienna thought about those nights at Castellano's, being dismissed like furniture, apologizing for existing. Thought about the diamond woman who'd waved her away like smoke. Thought about every person who'd ever looked through her like she wasn't worth noticing. Yes, she said. That's exactly what I wanted. Then take it. Own it. Be the queen you were meant to be. Grace headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. Vincent's falling for you. Has been since the beginning. That can be a weapon or a weakness. Make sure you know which one you're wielding. She left, and Sienna was alone with her reflection and the weight of what came next. The meeting was held at Castellano's. Fitting, Sienna thought, that her coronation should happen where her old life had ended. The private dining room was packed. All the families were represented, the Irish from Hell's Kitchen, the Russians from Brighton Beach, the remnants of Carlo's organization now led by a chastened Marco, and Vincent's own extensive network. 40 of the most powerful criminals in New York gathered to witness this moment. Sienna entered beside Vincent, and every eye turned to her. She walked with her head high, her stride confident, her expression giving nothing away. These men, and they were mostly men, needed to see strength. Any hint of weakness, and they'd devour her. Vincent led her to the head of the table, the position of power, and gestured for silence. "You all know why we're here," he began, his voice carrying authority that made even the most hardened criminal straighten. 3 weeks ago, Carlo Rossetti betrayed our arrangements. He stole from me, endangered our partnerships, and attacked one of my most trusted associates. His actions threatened the stability we've all worked to maintain. Murmurs around the table. Some nodding, others carefully neutral. Carlo paid for his betrayal with his life. But his death created a vacancy, a need for someone strong enough to help me maintain order, smart enough to navigate our complex arrangements, and ruthless enough to do what's necessary when diplomacy fails. Vincent's hand rested on Sienna's shoulder, a gesture of both pride and possession. "I present to you Sienna Washington, my second-in-command, my partner, and anyone who wants to challenge her authority challenges me. Are we clear?" The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Sienna could feel them evaluating her, this woman who'd come from nowhere, who'd brought down Carlo Rossetti, who now stood at Vincent Romano's right hand. Finally, Dmitry Volkov, the Russian boss, a man with ice-blue eyes and a reputation for extreme violence, spoke. "The girl is impressive, Vincent. We all heard what she did. But second-in-command? That's a position of significant power. What makes her qualified beyond being your—" He paused meaningfully. "Associate." The room went very quiet. It was a challenge, carefully phrased but unmistakable. Dmitry was questioning whether Sienna had earned her position or simply slept her way into it. Vincent's expression went cold. "Dmitry." "I'll answer," Sienna said, stepping forward. Vincent looked at her sharply, but she ignored him. This was her moment. She had to claim it herself. She turned to face Dmitry directly. "You want to know what qualifies me? 6 months ago, I was nobody. Invisible. Then I witnessed a murder, survived being hunted, and made a choice to join this family rather than run. Since then, I've trained in combat, weapons, intelligence gathering. I infiltrated Carlo's organization, earned his son's trust, and gathered the evidence that exposed his betrayal." She moved closer to Dmitry, unafraid. "When Carlo shot Grace, I helped Vincent plan the assault that ended him. I convinced Marco Rossetti to betray his own father. And when the moment came, I put a bullet in Carlo without hesitation. So you want to know what qualifies me?" She smiled, sharp as a blade. "I've earned every inch of ground I stand on. In blood. In sacrifice. In loyalty. Can you say the same?" The silence was absolute. Then Dmitry threw back his head and laughed, genuine, appreciative. "Da. She has teeth, this one. I like her, Vincent. She will do well, I think." The tension broke. Around the table, others nodded approval. Even those who'd been skeptical now looked at Sienna with a mix of respect and wariness. She'd passed the test. Vincent pulled her close, kissed her temple. "That's my queen," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. Pride and something deeper, something almost like love, colored his voice. The rest of the meeting proceeded with business, territory discussions, shipment schedules, disputes to be mediated. But Sienna's mind was elsewhere, processing what had just happened. She'd done it. Claimed her place. Made them see her not as Vincent's accessory but as a power in her own right. After the meeting ended and the families dispersed, Marco approached her hesitantly. "Sienna," he said, his voice uncertain. "Can we talk?" She nodded, following him to a quiet corner. Marco looked like he'd aged 10 years, haunted eyes, shoulders slumped with guilt and grief. "I wanted to say, thank you. For giving me a way out that night. I know you didn't have to." "You made the right choice," Sienna said. "Did I?" Marco's laugh was bitter. "I betrayed my father. Helped kill him. What kind of son does that make me? The kind who survives. The kind who's smart enough to know when a war is already lost. Sienna's voice was gentle but firm. Your father made his choices, Marco. You're not responsible for them. You're only responsible for your own choices going forward. Vincent put me in charge of what's left of our organization. Said it was conditional on my loyalty. My absolute loyalty. Marco met her eyes. To him and to you. He said you'd be watching, making sure I stay in line. Will you? Stay in line. Marco nodded slowly. I loved my father, but he was wrong. What he did to Grace, that crossed a line. I won't make his mistakes. He paused. And Sienna? I know what we had wasn't real. I know you were playing me, getting close to gather information. But I want you to know, for me, it felt real. You were the first person who ever made me feel like I was more than just Carlo's son. Guilt flickered through Sienna. Brief, sharp. She'd used Marco, manipulated his feelings, betrayed his trust. In the old world, that would have made her a monster. But this wasn't the old world. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it. You deserved better than being a pawn in someone else's game. We're all pawns, Sienna. The trick is figuring out how to become a player. Marco managed a small smile. Maybe you can teach me that. If you're willing. Maybe, Sienna said. Let's see how loyal you prove to be. He left, and Sienna returned to Vincent, who was waiting by the bar, 2 glasses of whiskey in his hands. He offered her one. To the Queen, he said, raising his glass. To the King, she replied, and they drank. The whiskey burned, smooth and expensive, nothing like the cheap liquor she used to afford. Everything was different now. Everything. Come with me, Vincent said, setting down his glass. There's something I want to show you. He took her to a building in Midtown, one of his properties, newly renovated. The penthouse floor had been transformed into an office suite, all glass and steel and modern luxury. But it was the nameplate on the main office door that made Sienna's breath catch. Sienna Washington, Executive Operations Director, Romano Enterprises. It's yours, Vincent said. Your base of operations. You'll oversee the legitimate businesses, the imports, the restaurants, the real estate holdings. Grace handled it before, but now it's your domain. Sienna walked into the office, taking in the massive desk, the floor-to-ceiling windows with their view of the city, the leather chairs and modern art. A kingdom of glass and steel. Vincent. She turned to him, overwhelmed. This is what you deserve. What you've earned. He moved closer, pulling her into his arms. 6 months ago, you were serving coffee at Castellano's. Now you're running an empire. Tell me, was it worth it? Everything you sacrificed? Everything you became? Sienna thought about the question. Thought about the blood on her hands, the lives she'd helped end, the person she used to be. Then she thought about being invisible. About apologizing for existing. About the diamond woman who dismissed her like furniture. Yes, she said. It was worth it. Vincent kissed her, not the claiming kisses of before, but something deeper. Tender. Real. I love you, he said against her lips. I didn't plan to. Didn't want to. Love is weakness in this business. But Sienna, you're extraordinary. Watching you transform, watching you claim your power, it's been the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed. Sienna's heart hammered. She'd known he cared for her, desired her, valued her. But love? Vincent. You don't have to say it back. I know this started as necessity. I saved you, gave you no choice. But somewhere along the way, you became more than my asset. You became my equal. My partner. My queen. His grey eyes held hers. And I want to build this empire with you. Not just as my second-in-command, but as my wife. The word hung between them. Wife. You're proposing. Sienna's voice was barely a whisper. I'm offering you everything I have. My power, my protection, my name. In this world, marriage means something. It means you're untouchable, family, sacred. Vincent pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring that made Sienna's breath catch. A diamond the size of her thumb, set in platinum, surrounded by smaller stones that glittered like stars. Marry me, Sienna Washington. Be my queen in every sense. Rule this city with me. Sienna stared at the ring, at this man, at the life he was offering. 6 months ago, she'd been running for her life, terrified and powerless. Now she stood in a penthouse office with her name on the door, having just been crowned before the city's criminal elite, holding the heart of the most dangerous man in New York. It should have been a fairy tale. But fairy tales didn't have blood and bullets and bodies in warehouses. Yes, she heard herself say. Vincent's smile was brilliant, transforming his face. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because of course he'd known her size, had probably known this moment was coming long before she did. He kissed her again, fierce and possessive and full of promise. And Sienna kissed him back, this criminal king, this man who'd saved and enslaved her, who'd given her everything she'd ever wanted and made her someone she barely recognized. What have I become? The thought whispered through her mind, but she pushed it away. There was no going back. The girl she'd been was dead. Long live the Queen. 2 months later. The wedding was held at a private estate in the Hamptons, small by society standards, but every guest was someone who mattered in their world. The families came to pay respect. Grace came, healthy now, tears in her eyes as she watched Sienna walk down the aisle. Even Marco came, representing what remained of his family's organization. Sienna wore white, traditional, ironic, beautiful. The dress was custom, flowing silk that made her look like she'd stepped out of a dream. Vincent stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his eyes never leaving her as she approached. They spoke their vows before a judge who knew better than to ask questions. Promised to love, honor, and cherish, words that meant something different in their world. Love tinged with darkness. Honor measured in loyalty. Cherishing that included accepting the violence inherent in their lives. When Vincent kissed her, sealing their union, Sienna felt something shift inside her. A final transformation. She wasn't just Sienna Washington anymore. She was Sienna Romano, the Mafia queen. At the reception, she stood beside her husband, and that word still felt strange, impossible, greeting guests, accepting congratulations, playing the part of the blushing bride. But underneath, she was always watching, always calculating, always aware of the power dynamics at play. Dmitry Volkov approached, raising his glass. To the bride and groom. May your empire grow as legendary as your love story. Thank you, Dmitry, Sienna said, smiling. I must admit, the Russian continued, when Vincent first brought you to our attention, I had doubts. But you have proven yourself formidable. Carlo learned that the hard way, D.A. Carlo made his choices, Sienna said evenly. As we all do. Dimitri's ice-blue eyes glittered. And now you have chosen to bind yourself to Vincent, to this life, permanently. No escape, no second thoughts. You understand this, yes. It wasn't a question, not really. It was a reminder. She'd crossed a threshold. There was no going back. I understand perfectly, Sienna said. Dmitry nodded, satisfied, and moved on. Later, as the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Vincent found Sienna standing alone on the terrace, looking out at the water. Regretting it already? He asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. No, Sienna said. And she meant it. Just thinking about how far I've come. 6 months ago. 6 months ago, you were a different person. That girl doesn't exist anymore. Vincent wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. You're Sienna Romano now. My wife. My partner. My equal. The most powerful woman in New York's underworld. From waitress to queen, Sienna murmured. It's insane when you think about it. Or inevitable. Vincent turned her to face him. You were always meant for greatness, Sienna. You just needed the right circumstances to reveal it. To forge you into who you were always supposed to be. Maybe he was right. Maybe there had always been something dark inside her, something hungry for power, just waiting for the right trigger. Or maybe anyone, given the right push, could become something monstrous. Did it matter? She was here now. She'd claimed her throne. She'd become visible, more than visible. She'd become legendary. I love you, she told Vincent, and realized it was true. Not the pure, simple love of fairy tales, but something complex and dark and real. Love mixed with gratitude and resentment, with need and desire, with partnership and possession. "I love you too," he said. "My magnificent, ruthless, brilliant queen." He kissed her as the sun set on her old life and rose on her new one. 6 months after the wedding, Sienna sat in her office at Romano Enterprises, reviewing reports. The legitimate businesses were thriving under her management. She'd proved to have a talent for administration, for seeing patterns and opportunities that others missed. Profits were up 30%. Several new ventures had been launched. Vincent trusted her completely, and she'd earned that trust. But today, her mind wasn't on spreadsheets. Grace had called that morning with news. Anthony, the scarred enforcer who died in the warehouse, had a brother. And that brother had just been released from prison. "He's been asking questions," Grace had warned. "About you. About what happened to Anthony. About Carlo. Vincent needs to know." Sienna stared at her phone, considering. She could tell Vincent, let him handle it. That would be the smart play, the safe play. Or, she picked up her phone and dialed a different number. "Jackson? It's Sienna. I need you to find someone for me." Because this was her world now. She wasn't just Vincent's wife, wasn't just his partner. She was a power in her own right. And when threats emerged, she could handle them herself. The old Sienna would have been terrified. The new Sienna felt only cold calculation. An hour later, Jackson called back with an address. Anthony's brother, a man named Luca, was staying at a motel in Queens. Sienna pulled on her leather jacket, checked her gun, and headed out. The drive gave her time to think. About how easy this had become, planning violence, preparing to potentially kill someone. About how the woman who'd been terrified of blood 6 months ago now barely blinked at the prospect of spilling it. What have I become? But she knew the answer. She'd become exactly what she needed to be. Strong. Powerful. Visible. Untouchable. The motel was a dump, the kind of place where people went to hide or disappear. Sienna found Luca's room, knocked on the door with her gun hidden in her jacket pocket. The man who answered was a harder, meaner version of Anthony. Same scarred knuckles, same flat eyes. He recognized her immediately. "You," he breathed. "We need to talk," Sienna said calmly. "About your brother. About what happened. About what happens next." Luca's hand moved toward his waistband, probably reaching for a weapon. But Sienna was faster. Her gun was out and aimed at his chest before he could draw. "Don't," she said. "I'm not here to kill you, Luca. Not unless you make me. I'm here to offer you a choice." It was the same choice Vincent had offered her, all those months ago. Join the family or leave the city. Live or die. Choose power or choose obscurity. And as Sienna stood in that dingy motel doorway, gun in hand, offering life or death with equal calm, she realized something profound. She wasn't the waitress anymore. Wasn't the frightened girl running across rooftops. Wasn't even the woman who'd married Vincent Romano and become his queen. She was something more. Something harder. Something that had been forged in blood and fire and transformation. She was the woman who made others choose. The woman who held the power of life and death. The woman who would never, ever be invisible again. Luca looked at her gun, at her eyes, at the absolute certainty in her stance. "What's the choice?" he asked. Sienna smiled, not the apologetic smile of her old life, but something sharp and dangerous and real. "Let me tell you a story," she said. "About a waitress who became a queen. And then let's talk about what you're going to become." 1 year after Sienna Washington first walked into Vincent Romano's world, she stood on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out over New York City, her city now, in every way that mattered. Behind her, through the glass doors, she could hear Vincent on a business call, his voice calm and commanding as he navigated some dispute between the families. She'd handle it later if he needed her. They worked together now, a perfect team, each complementing the other's strengths. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Shipment arrived safely. All numbers match. "Thank you for trusting me." She'd given him more responsibility lately, testing his loyalty, watching him grow from his father's weak shadow into something more capable. Under her guidance, he was becoming useful. Maybe even an ally. Another text, this one from Grace. "Dinner next week? I want to hear about the new restaurant acquisition." Grace had retired but remained connected, a friend and advisor. They met regularly, two women who'd survived the darkness and come out stronger. And finally, A text from Jackson. Luca just made his first collection. Clean, professional, no issues. You were right about him. Sienna smiled. Luca had made the right choice, joined the family, proved his worth, found a place in their organization. Just like she had. Just like so many others who'd been given the same choice, transform or disappear. The city sprawled below her, millions of lights, millions of people. Most of them invisible, struggling, surviving. Like she'd once been. But not anymore. Now when Sienna Washington Romano walked into a room, people noticed. They saw her. They respected her. They feared her. She was visible in every possible way. And it had cost her everything. Her innocence, her old self, the simple dreams she'd once had. But in exchange, she'd gained power beyond imagining. She'd claimed her throne. She'd become the queen. Vincent emerged onto the balcony, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his warmth solid and real. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The future," Sienna said. "Everything we're going to build. Everything we're going to become." "We're already legendary," Vincent said with a smile. "Then let's become mythical." He laughed, spinning her around to face him. "That's my queen. Always reaching higher." Sienna kissed him, her husband, her partner, her king. The man who'd seen her potential when she was still invisible. Who'd offered her a devil's bargain that became the best choice she'd ever made. In the distance, sirens wailed. Somewhere in the city, violence was happening. Crime. Chaos. The eternal struggle between order and entropy. And at the center of it all, pulling the strings, making the choices that shaped the underworld, sat Sienna Romano. She'd been just a waitress. Until she became the Mafia queen. And this was only the beginning. As Sienna stood on that balcony, looking out over her empire, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From invisible to untouchable. From powerless to powerful. From surviving to thriving. Sometimes the only way out is through. Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find who you really are. Sometimes becoming the villain is the only way to write your own story. What would you sacrifice to never be invisible again? How far would you go to claim the power you deserve? Would you make the same choice Sienna did, or would you run? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This is more than just a story. It's a question we all face. What are we willing to become to get what we want? And if you want more stories about transformation, power, and the price we pay for both, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because Sienna's story isn't over. It's just beginning. Thanks for experiencing this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it.